Now I'd like to address a point that I feel personally very strongly about, and that is depriving a trustee in prospective legislation of the right to recover preferences and fraudulent transfers in certain instances. Ms. Chapman testified about this issue. Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, I cannot urge you strongly enough to reject this amendment. If enacted, it would deprive the victims Ms. Chapman represents of literally millions of dollars. The Madoff trustee has used the avoiding powers granted to him by SIPC and the Bankruptcy Code judiciously. He has not sued small investors. He's instituted preference and fraudulent transfer proceedings against large investors who receive disproportionate returns. But the weapons in the trustee's arsenal include the fact that all he must prove is disparate return without any issue of legitimate expectation arising. Ms. Chapman's written statement at page 17 says that the trustee in Madoff has already sued several elderly, virtually destitute investors. Ms. Chapman is a vigorous advocate, but she's factually incorrect. The only situation in the Madoff case where small investors have been sued were 3 instances where the claimants ignored the claims filing procedure that has been in place for 39 years and initiated a lawsuit against the trustee. In short, the trustee was required to institute mandatory counterclaims, and those are the only small investors who have been sued.
My name is Norma Hill, and I am making this statement in response to one made by Mr. Stephen Harbeck. On September 9th, I sat in the House of Representatives when Mr. Stephen Harbeck, the president of SIPC, testified emphatically that the trustee, Mr. Irving Picard, would not claw back the little people. This is an absolute lie. By any standards, I am one of the little people, and Mr. Picard is persecuting me. Not only have I received a clawback letter, Mr. Picard retained a former FBI agent turned private investigator to telephone my home. He stated that he was in the neighborhood and asked if he could come to my house to discuss the Master's Vacation Fund to which I had contributed for my grandchildren over the years. The phone call terrified me and precipitated an extreme anxiety attack requiring medication. My husband and I had a blended family of 5 children. The oldest is mentally handicapped and requires special education. We were never wealthy, and we both worked all our lives to provide a decent life and the best education that we could afford for our children. When my husband left his job in advertising, he received a profit-sharing check. This was the first large sum of money that we had ever had. My husband invested with Bernard Madoff on the recommendation of trusted relatives. He died from a heart attack several weeks later. I was a young widow with 5 children in various stages of their education. I added his life insurance, deferred income, and other monies to the existing account. This was 22 years ago. For the next 15 years, I continued working as a marketing consultant specializing in the pharmaceutical industry. When my company was sold, I decided to take the package that they were offering. I transferred my pension, 401k, and severance pay into Madoff. I believed that I would be able to live out my life independently and with dignity, and to help my children if necessary. On December 11th, 2008, all this changed. I discovered that I had lost my life savings. 1 year later, almost to the day, I received a letter from Mr. Picard requesting that I pay back the amount of $256,000 withdrawn from my accounts. I am not quite sure how he arrived at this figure. I do not have all the records going back to the original deposits that were made 22 years ago. Mr. Picard, how am I supposed to pay this money? The only thing that I own is my condominium, which I cannot afford to keep and I cannot sell. I have been kept afloat by a small savings account, Social Security, and the help from friends and family. I am currently under the doctor's care because I am suffering from extreme anxiety attacks, and I have been unable to sleep since I received your letter and phone call from the private investigator. I am not optimistic about returning to my career given my age. In Mr. Picard's letter requesting that I return the $256,000, he included a statement, and I quote, "The trustee reserves the right to request repayment of funds connected to Mrs. Hill's involvement in the 1973 Master's Vacation Fund at a later date." End of quote. This was a limited partnership that I invested in on behalf of my granddaughters. I matched birthday money, babysitting money, and other monetary gifts that they were given. This was to help them with college when the time came. Mr. Picard never at any time was one penny taken out of this account. The approximate value is under $40,000. I am an innocent victim, and I have been abandoned by my government that feels it is no longer accountable. The people at the SEC focused on their own careers and not on the well-being of the general public. They feared offending Mr. Madoff. He had the power to make them or break them. SIPC has not lived up to its charter and is using every possible means to avoid its responsibility. And I am stuck in the middle, and I have done nothing.